Welcome to the art and science of difficult conversations. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lucy, and we love having difficult conversations.
That's right. And each week we'll either share a tip, hear how others have gotten better at difficult conversations, or demonstrate common difficult conversations and what to do and what not to do.
Let's get into it.
On today's episode, I want to talk about something that's come up for us a few times is when do I draw the line? When do I end a difficult conversation? And I think this is an important one because it's really about how do you set healthy boundaries. A lot of times a conversation won't be productive anymore or a conflict. It might be veering into disrespect or harm. And that's not great. That's not going to be a useful use of your time or somebody else's time. So today I want to go through two main things. When is it time to draw the line? What are the indicators that you should probably stop the conversation or take a pause at the very least? And then how do you stop it? How do you stop the conversation or end the conversation in a way that you can continue the conversation and or do what you need to do? Let's go into quickly, when is it time to draw the line? So here are some things. It's not an exhaustive list, but I think it covers a huge portion of situations. So, number one is if it starts becoming personal. So there's personal attacks, there start becoming disrespect, name calling. That's important to draw the line. You know, these kind of conversations should be focusing on issues, not a person's character. And it goes to for you too. If you're listening, you should not be attacking someone's character. You should be focusing on the issues. And when they start going into you as a person, it might be time to stop that conversation. Or if emotions become way out of line, let's say your emotions or their emotions. But when emotions get high, the problem is your brain gets hijacked and you're not able to actually think logically and communicate effectively. You're just reacting, you're not responding. You might say something that's not good. So that might be the time. Let's pause the conversation. Another time, what if it's compromising your values? This is where you're going to have to think through. This is why I always think it's important to set ground rules at the beginning. Think about what are your values. If we start talking about things or talking in a way that compromises your values, then it's time to draw the line. If we start talking about lying or if we start talking about other people and you've set that boundary at the beginning, you should be following that boundary. Also, if things keep going in circles, let's say now you keep talking about the same thing over and over again, there's an impasse, you're not moving ahead, that's a good time to say, let's take a break. You know, you're not going to get anywhere by continuing the talk and you're just going to frustrate both of you. Take that moment to think, should we even continue this conversation at this point? Another one is, let's say there becomes physical or emotional safety concerns. You're talking to somebody else that gets threatening, that starts intimidating you, that starts getting physically in your space. That's going to be definitely time you want to stop and get out of there and make sure you're safe. The last one that I have on my list is legal or ethical boundaries. Let's say now that the conversation is veering into things that are encouraging violating policies, crossing boundaries or crossing ethical boundaries. You might say, hey, this is not where I want to be. It's very similar to your idea of core values. You know, if something is important to you, you got to consider what's non-negotiable and what's going to make me stop that conversation. So if you get to that point, how do you draw that line? Number one, you got to be clear and direct. You got to communicate clearly that this conversation isn't being productive anymore, it's not appropriate, and you just want to pause. You don't have to blame anybody. You just say the conversation itself is not being productive at this point. I don't feel safe, or I don't feel like we're going to get anywhere, or I would like to take a break at this point. You could always even ask, is it worth it to take a break? Is it okay if we take a break and come back to this in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a day, whatever it is? But just set up a clear follow-up time. You know, a lot of times that pause allows you to get perspective on the situation, replay what you've said, what they've said, and think through what's going on. And maybe you come to a new conclusion that wasn't there before. You might want to seek mediation, right? If the conversation gets stuck, you might say, hey, listen, we're not getting anywhere. Do you think it's worth us bringing someone else to help facilitate this? That might be a reasonable solution. What I would also encourage is you should refer back to the ground rules that you set. If you set ground rules, You can just say, hey, listen, I know that at the beginning we both agreed at these ground rules and now we're starting to cross it. What do you want to do about that? I always suggest leaving it as a question. That allows the other person to continue to engage in the conversation and think about the answer. And it also allows them to feel like they're an equal partner in the conversation as opposed to you're just telling them what's happening. I always like that approach the best. One of the things to really consider is you got to prioritize your well-being and safety. I really encourage you to think about those non-negotiables for you and realize that your safety is important as well. A last approach I'll tell you before you break off or before you disengage is acknowledging the small win. Find something that you did agree on earlier, even if it was just the ground rule. Say, listen, I know that we've had a lot of conflict, but we were able to get here. We were able to talk together and set ground rules and agree that we wanted to solve this problem. And I know we still want to. I know you still want to. I still want to. Let's come back at a separate time. Let's come back in 20 minutes and talk about it some further. Just acknowledging those small wins can be helpful to build on that and align yourself and show that you are on the same side. Don't feel like this is a failure if you have to disengage. Realize that this is part of being assertive, is keeping yourself safe, but also keeping the other person safe and maintaining boundaries in a healthy way. You don't have to yell. You don't have to get angry. You just have to say, these are the boundaries that we've set. And that's it. So hopefully this was helpful. It's not about shutting down a conversation or avoiding these difficult topics. It's making sure that the conversation is productive. It's making sure that it's respectful, you're productive, and you're healthy. These boundaries are really important. A lot of times in toxic relationships, boundaries are crossed left and right, and then people don't feel respected. People feel like they're compromising their own personal values. So this is the key here. How can you set your boundaries? How can you respect your boundaries and the other person's boundaries to maintain that healthy relationship, even if you don't get the right resolution that you want? Hopefully that was helpful when and how to set the limit and end the conversation. Tune in next week when Lucy and I are going to role play how to manage up to a micromanager. So you got a micromanager. How are you going to manage up and work with them so that you can get your stuff done without feeling like somebody's over your shoulder the entire time? Please subscribe this podcast, leave a review if you are finding value in this. In any case, we'll see you next week.